Chapter 5. As if the sky were falling on our heads. A little bit too loud. On the morning of July 21st, 1962, Israelis woke up to their worst nightmare. Egypt's newspapers reported the successful test launch of 4 surface-to-surface missiles. 2 of the new Al-Zafar, the Victor model of the 2 Al-Qahar, the Conqueror models. 2 days later, the missiles, 10 of each type, draped with the Egyptian flag, were paraded through Cairo along the Nile River. Some 300 foreign diplomats were among the spectators, as were many of the residents of Cairo. President Nasser himself reviewed the parade from a special stand before a government building near the Nile. He proudly declared that the Egyptian military was now capable of hitting any point south of Beirut. Given that the entire territory of Israel lay between Egypt to its south and Lebanon, with Beirut as its capital, to the north, the implication was clear. The next day, a broadcast delivered in Hebrew from the Egypt-based radio station, the Voice of Thunder from Cairo, was even more explicit. These missiles were intended to open the gates of freedom for the Arabs, to retake their homeland that was stolen as part of the imperialist and Zionist plots, the anchorman boasted. The Israeli public's deep unease was only magnified when just a few weeks later it became clear that a team of German scientists had played an integral role in developing these missiles. World War II had ended only 17 years earlier, and suddenly the traumas of the Holocaust, suffused as they were with images of German scientists in Weimar uniforms, gave way to a new and different existential threat. Weapons of mass destruction in the hands of Israel's new great enemy, Nasser, whom Israelis regarded as the Hitler of the Middle East. Former German Nazis are now helping Nasser in his anti-Israeli genocide projects, was the news described by the Jewish press. And the Mossad, despite its sweeping charter to monitor and protect Israel from external threats, had been caught unaware. The Jewish nation's intelligence services, to say nothing of its political and military leaders, had been stunned to learn of Egypt's missile project mere days before the test launch. It was a devastating reminder of the little country's vulnerability and a humiliating failure for Harel's Mossad. Worse, the German scientists developing the Egyptian missiles that they could destroy Israel weren't obscure technicians. They were some of the Nazis' most senior engineers, men who'd worked during the war at the research base in Peenemünde, a peninsula on the Baltic coast where the Third Reich's most advanced weaponry was developed. They helped build the V-1, the flying bomb that terrorized England, and the V-2 ballistic missile, which the Germans had used to destroy huge sections of Antwerp and London, and which served as the prototype for today's long-range surface-to-surface missiles. I felt helpless, said Asher Ben Natzen, the Director General of the Defense Ministry, as if the sky were falling on our heads. Ben-Gurion again and again spoke of the nightmare that kept him awake at night, that he, the first Prime Minister, had brought the surviving Jews to Europe to the State of Israel, only for them here, in his own country, to undergo a second Holocaust. The Mossad itself, in a top-secret internal inquiry into the affair conducted in 1982, summed it up like this: "It was one of the most important and traumatic events in the history of the Israeli intelligence community, one of the type that leads to a chain reaction that engenders extreme actions." And indeed, the reactions were extreme. Harel placed the entire Mossad on emergency footing. An atmosphere of crisis swept through every corridor of the agency, reflected in the internal cables of those months. "We are interested in obtaining intelligence material, whatever may happen," the HQ in Tel Aviv cabled Mossad stations in Europe in August 1962. If a German man turns up who knows something about this and is not prepared to cooperate, we are ready to take him by force and to get him to talk. Please take note of this because we must get information at any cost. Mossad operatives immediately began breaking into Egyptian diplomatic embassies and consulates in several European capitals to photograph documents. They were also able to recruit a Swiss employee at the Zurich office of Egypt Air, a company that occasionally served as cover for Nasser's intelligence agencies. The Swiss employee allowed Mossad operatives to take the mail bags at night twice a week to a safe house. They were opened, their contents were photocopied, and then they were closed again by experts who left no sign they had been tampered with, then returned to the airline office. After a relatively short period, the Mossad had a preliminary understanding of the Egyptian missile project in its heads. The project had been initiated by two internationally known scientists, Dr. Eugene Sanger and Wolfgang Pils. During the war, they had played key roles in Bienemünde Army Research Center. In 1954, they joined the Research Institute of Jet Propulsion Physics in Stuttgart. Sanger headed this prestigious body. Pils and two other veteran Weimar specialists, Dr. Paul Gorche and Dr. Heinz Krug, were heads of departments. But this group, feeling underemployed and underutilized in post-war Germany, approached the Egyptian regime in 1959 and offered to recruit and lead a group of scientists to develop long-range surface-to-surface rockets. Nasser readily agreed and appointed one of his closest military advisors, General Isam al-Din Mohammed Khalil, former director of Air Force Intelligence and the chief of the Egyptian Army's R&D, to coordinate the program. Khalil set up a compartmentalized system separate from the rest of the Egyptian army for the German scientists who first arrived in Egypt for a visit in April 1960. In late 1961, Sanger, Pils, Gorke, Sanger, Pils, and Gorke relocated to Egypt and recruited about 35 highly experienced German scientists and technicians to join them. The facilities in Egypt contained test fields, laboratories, and luxurious living quarters for the German expats who enjoyed excellent conditions and huge salaries. Krug, however, remained in Germany, where he set up a company called Intra Commercial, which was in fact the group's European front. Almost as soon as the Mossad had gained a basic grasp of the situation, however, more bad news arrived. On August 16, 1962, a grave-faced Isser Harel came to see Ben-Gurion, bringing with him a document from the Egyptian intelligence mailbags that had been photocopied 2 days before in Zurich. The Israelis were in shock. The document was an order written in 1962 by Pils to the project managers in Egypt, and it included itemization of the materials that needed to be acquired in Europe for the manufacture of 900 missiles. This was an enormous number. After its interception, according to a Mossad internal report, the organization was hit by an atmosphere of near panic. Worse still, the document raised the fear among Israeli experts that the Egyptians' true aim was to arm the missiles with radioactive and chemical warheads, or just to sell them as a shitload of missiles. Ben-Gurion summoned urgent conferences at the highest level. Harel had a plan of sorts. The intelligence collected so far by the Mossad revealed an Achilles heel in the missile project. The guidance systems were lagging so far behind as to be borderline non-functional, which meant that the missiles could not go into mass production. As long as this was the case, Egypt would need the German scientists. Without them, the project would collapse. Harel's plan then was to kidnap or to eliminate the Germans. Toward the end of August, Harel went to Europe to put his plan into action. The weather was turning cold, heralding the coldest winter the area had known in many years. After all efforts to locate Pils had failed, Harl decided to act against Krug. On Monday, September 10th at 5:30 p.m., a man who introduced himself as Saleh Kahar, phoned Krug's home in Munich. He said he was speaking on behalf of Colonel Said Nadim, chief aide to General Mahmoud Khalil, and that Nadim had to meet Krug right away on an important matter. Saleh, in the friendliest of tones, said that Nadim, whom Krug knew well, sent his regards and was waiting for Krug at the Ambassador Hotel in Munich. The matter at hand, Saleh said, was a deal that would make a tidy profit for Krug. It was impossible to discuss it in the intra-office because of its special nature. Krug didn't see this as unusual, and he accepted the invitation. Saleh was none other than an old Mossad hand, Oded. Oh shit. Born in Iraq, he had been active in the Zionist underground there. Fleeing the country in 1949, and after almost being caught, he'd gone to regular schools in Baghdad with Muslims and could easily pass for an Arab. Years later, he served the Mossad in an operational capacity against Arab targets. Krug met Oded in the lobby of the Ambassador Hotel. "We, Colonel Nadim and I, need you for an important job," he said. The next day, Oded went to the intra-office to pick Krug up and take him to meet Nadim at a villa outside the city. "I came in a taxi," said and Krug was happy to see me and introduced me to the company's employees. He never suspected for a moment that I wasn't who I said I was. There was a good chemistry between us in the Mercedes on the way to the address I'd given him. I flattered Krug and told him how we, in Egyptian intelligence, appreciate his service and contribution. He spoke mainly about the new Mercedes he'd just bought.